Rock climbing, of course, is great. There are a few terms that we're going to use tonight that if you're not familiar with rock climbing, you might not understand, so I'm going to go through those really quickly. So the first one is top rope climbing. So top rope climbing, what that means is the anchors are above you. The anchors, of course, are the points that keep you from falling to the ground. So top rope climbing, and then we have something called lead climbing. Lead climbing is when you are simply bringing the rope up from below to clip into anchors that are progressively up the wall. So there are two types of lead climbing that we will talk about tonight. The first one is sport climbing. So sport climbing utilizes sport climbing draws or carabiners that are affixed by a piece of nylon webbing or Dyneema webbing, and this is the anchor. As you go up, you will clip into things that have been drilled and either drilled into the wall, glued into the wall, or somehow affixed to the wall so that when you clip them, this now becomes your anchor. The next type of lead climbing that we'll talk about is traditional climbing. Traditional climbing uses protection that you bring up with yourself, but then can be removed as you kind of come down the route. So traditionally they look like things like this, and we'll talk about them a little bit later and how they work and what they do. So that's a quick overview on terms. If you have any other terms you want to get to know, please let us know and we can kind of describe those for you. So the Ohio-ish places that we'll talk about tonight are kind of focused in the Midwest, kind of southern Midwest area. So Logtown, Mad River Gorge being, and Whips Ledges being all in Ohio. Those are three destinations already. And then Mcconnell's Mill being just north of Pittsburgh, and then Seneca Rocks, the New River Gorge being in West Virginia, and the Red River Gorge being in Kentucky. So that's kind of like the meccas of Midwest climbing. So the top ones, of course, not as popular as the bottom ones, but still really great places to get out and climb. So the first one that I'm going to talk about, actually first I'm going to show you the map of where these are kind of located. So you can see the bottom left corner would be the one that is in Kentucky, which is the Red River Gorge. Just north of that or up from that star is what you would call the Mad River Gorge, and then kind of as you move clockwise, it would be Whips Ledges, Logtown, McConnell's Mill, New River Gorge, and then Seneca Rocks. So that's kind of like in a clockwork fashion. That's those locations, and we'll talk a little bit more as we keep going. So a little bit about me. My name's Zach. I am a full-time instructor for the Cleveland Metro Parks Outdoor Recreation Department. I am a certified rock climbing instructor, and we do teach rock climbing through the Cleveland Metro Parks. And my favorite rock climb that I've ever done is a climb called High Exposure, which is located in the Gunks or the Shungunks region in New Paltz, New York. So rock climbing is something I really like to do. I even built a rock climbing wall this winter in my garage. So it's something that I do quite a lot of. So the first place that we're going to talk about is Logtown, Ohio. So Logtown climbing area is located in Lisbon, Ohio. So from Cleveland, you're looking at about an hour and a half to 2-hour drive, depending on how you drive and which entrance you take. Luckily, once you get there, there's a very large gravel parking lot that can accommodate a great number of vehicles, as well as a very short hike to the climbing area. What's great about Logtown is it's been kind of stewarded and developed with many partners across Ohio, the Ohio's Climbers Coalition, as well as local stewards of the area, so that the trail is actually very well marked with small brown signs with a white climber on it, so it's really easy to see. There is a bathroom located near the parking lot, and like I said, since it is near Lisbon, Ohio, all of your kind of normal services will be there as well. So you can either bring all of your stuff or purchase while you're down there. So as we get into what types of climbing is there, so like I started talking about before, so predominantly it's lead climbing. So the top area of Logtown, since it is on private property, they ask that you don't go up there, as well as the top, being an old quarry, is quite unstable. So predominantly at Logtown, what you'll find is sport climbing and trad climbing. So remember, that's the lead style of variation, and that means as you walk up the wall, you are placing the protection so that you don't fall to the ground. So something that you'll need to get started to go to Logtown is you'd like to have yourself some rock climbing draws, or quick draws as they're called, which is a series of carabiners connected by those webbing, like I said before. a rock climbing rope, really of any length, so the walls at Logtown aren't particularly high, which is great, one for newer climbers, but also for getting in a ton of routes in a day. It's really great to kind of be there and quick day trip and get a number of climbs in, as well as a harness. So that's really all you'll need to go down there. When it comes to draws, you're looking at it in the range of needing 6 to 8 per day, depending on what climb you do. So it is something you need to pre-plan for, because if you run out of quick draws, you got to come down to the bottom, because you can't climb and anchor yourself with nothing. Also, what is available at Logtown is bouldering. So bouldering is the kind of last type of climbing that we'll talk about tonight. But bouldering doesn't require any sort of active protection, so those quick draws or a harness or a rope. It does, however, require protection in the sense of a pad that is laid on the ground so that you don't injure yourself if you do fall. There are about 50-ish routes, and also what's great is, as you can see by the map here, wonderful stewards of the area have kind of really been great to outline where everything is. And there actually, fun fact is, there is a designated designated rappelling area so that you can practice rappelling if that's something that kind of interests you as well. So as we go through these pictures, what you'll kind of see is the rock type is of a kind of sandstone variety. It's an old quarry. So what you get with old quarries is shorter walls, blockier structure, as well as kind of the looseness that can happen. So it's really important to have the protection of a helmet and other things. So as we flip through the pictures here, you'll see, so this is kind of what doesn't look all that impressive, but it's a wonderful type of climbing down there. So he is lead climbing. So if you look kind of at his feet, you can see there's a carabiner with with the rope going through it. So that's lead climbing. The next photo also depicts lead climbing. It's a different climb. So it's just something that is easily done there. So that's Logtown. Logtown's about, like I said, about an hour and a half to 2 hours away. It makes for a great day trip. So the next destination that we're going to talk about is actually one of the newest in Ohio, and actually one of the newest kind of that's been developed. So it's called the Mad River Gorge. The Mad River Gorge is in Springfield, Ohio, which is just southwest of the Columbus area. So you're looking at 2.5 hours to get there. There is camping nearby, as well as a wonderful paved parking lot with a kiosk, a visitor's book, and all of the information that you would like to know. So it's a very short approach, just like Logtown is, and it's signed and annotated really well so that you know exactly where you are, what climbs you're looking at, as well as what is there. So there's a visitor's logbook that they also ask for you to sign while you are there. And luckily, and my coworker Dan, who's manning the computer right now before he comes up and presents as well, there is a designated guidebook that has been developed and is on sale so that you can buy to really understand the area. So just like Logtown, it has all three types of lead of climbing. So that's sport, bouldering, and then some top rope climbing, because if you didn't know, all sport climbs can be set up as a top rope, and a top rope anchor, of course, means that there is a continuous line from the climber on the ground to the anchors with no other protection in between, as well as bouldering. So just like Logtown, things that will get you by are those quick draws, as well as a harness, a rope, shoes, and things of that nature. Other thing that's really important to have when you go climbing is a belay device. So I have one here. This is called a tubular belay device because it has a tube that goes through it. So your rope would come through one of these tubes, make a loop, and then go back out. Belay devices work on friction, so as long as you're holding the rope, there's no way the rope can go through the device, so it's really important to learn how to belay before you start using one of those, and that is something that not only a lot of the local gyms do teach, but the Cleveland Metro Parks can teach you as well. Some fun facts about the Mad River Gorge actually is that over 125,000 pounds of trash was removed before the site opened. So it's a staggering amount. It used to be behind a development, and they actually had a crane that came and would pick dumpsters of trash out of the gorge before it came. This area continues to be developed as well through local partnerships as well as the Ohio Climbers Coalition. So if you haven't checked out the Mad River Gorge, it's a wonderful place. It has a plethora of climbs. It's also some of the walls on the shorter side, but that's all the Midwest climbing that we have out here. So while it's not as tall as some of the other climbs or Yosemite or other places, doesn't mean the climbs aren't just as good. So this is a standard picture of kind of what you would find at the Mad River Gorge. And what's really important about the Mad River Gorge is there is no top access at all. So this area has been designated a bottom access only, and what that means is you have to get to the anchors from the bottom via lead climbing. So it's really important that you take someone who kind of knows what they're doing, or don't climb too far above your grade, because then you might be leaving gear there. So it's really important to kind of do your research, and you might say, oh, where can I do this research? So mountainproject.com is a great place for all things rock climbing or alpinism. So Mountain Project, what it allows you to do is it allows you to filter by the area in which you are going. So if you filter by Ohio, you can look for, any of those two first places that I talked about, and you can filter by not only types of climbing, but grades of climbing, how hard things are, routes, and things of that nature. And it will also give you a detailed kind of explanation of what the route is, what you'll need to bring, and then maybe some comments from some other climbers that may have climbed it in the past. So next photo is actually of me climbing here with Dan a couple of years ago, and it was a wonderful time. So you can kind of see the rope follows up the rock, and that is me after taking a fall, so it does show that the bolts do hold, and it's kind of a wonderful place to get yourself acquainted to climbing in the Ohio area. So I'm going to step off now, and Dan is going to come talk about another local area, Whip Ledges, but also one closer to the Pittsburgh area and in West Virginia.
Nice, thank you, Zach. Just our little transition there. So like Zach said, I too am a rock climber. I've been climbing for a long time, as you can see on the screen there. I don't think I'm that old, but I guess I am now. And that's kind of the quote in climbing, I guess. I don't want to be a good climber, I just want to be an old climber. So maybe I'm an old climber, I don't know. 20 years is a realization for me that I have been climbing a long time. So as you can see, my favorite climb is in Las Vegas. It's been a while since I've been out there, but Frogland is this wonderful 5/8, and you can climb 6 pitches and then walk off, which is wonderful. So you can climb up, and a pitch, if you're not familiar, is generally 1 rope length or a significant portion. So you climb up, you build your anchor, as Zach was saying at the beginning, and then you climb up again and climb up again. So we'll talk about that. Seneca Rock has some multi-pitch stuff. The New River Gorge, if you really want to, has some multi-pitch stuff as well, but it's really like 1 or 2 pitches. So, but it's super fun. You can walk off, super, it's just cool. And Zach and I are both instructors, so if you go to take a class, later, whether with it's Cleveland Metro Parks or you're climbing somewhere else, and you're taking a climbing class with somebody else, a lot of the terminology is the same, and a lot of the principles are the same. So that's beneficial to you as a guest as you're learning about different places to climb and that sort of thing. So first place I'm going to talk about before we come local, we're going to kind of go a little bit farther away, come local to Whip Ledges, and then go farther away back to Seneca Rocks. So Mcconnell's Mill State Park, I grew up in this area. I'm not from Cleveland originally. I'm from Western Pennsylvania, and I was totally spoiled in that McConnell's Mills State Park was maybe 2 miles from my high school. So aside from basketball, this is what I did in the spring basically, and then in the fall, because that's when I started high school, over 20 years ago. So McConnell's Mills State Park, it's in Portersville, PA. So coming from Cleveland, you would just This is like an Ohio Alpine Start trip, right? You could go to McConnell's Mill. You could leave early in the morning, like 5, 6, 7, whenever. Drive to McConnell's Mill, just out the turnpike or out 422 towards Warren, Ohio, and then kind of skirt over that way. Portersville's, there's nothing there. Basically, a gas station is pretty much it. But it's really nice spot to climb. So McConnell's Mill is mostly top roping, I would say, and bouldering. There are a few traditional climbs, but not very many. I wouldn't, unless you're getting into trad climbing, it's not a place to go trad climbing. It's just a place to learn trad climbing as maybe you're mock leading as you're on top rope or something like that. So there's 2 main areas at McConnell's Mill, and we'll show pictures here in a minute, but we'll stay here just for a second. So Breakneck Bridge is the more secluded area, but a lot harder climb. So I think there's only like 157 there, and then there's a lot of harder climbs and a lot taller, but the access in Breakneck Bridge area is a lot harder to get to. Rim Road area is by far the most popular spot. Rim Road you can park, and not that I would recommend it, but you could build an anchor off your car. That's how close you are to the cliffs. So you kind of park on the top and you walk right there. There's a couple picnic areas, but it's pretty much right there. You can leave water in your car and go get it if you want. So Rim Road is great. There are guidebooks for there. This is an older one, so you're not going to be able to find one that looks like this exactly. But there is a new one out that you can find that has a lot of the climbs on it. As you can see from the book, there's only about 50 slides. I'm looking at the slides. There's only 50 pages on this book here. So there's not a ton of climbs there, but it's really convenient. Gear-wise that you would need, there are some bolts, and I know Zach had showed it before, but there are some bolts on some of the tops of the climbs. There is an island there to get up for certain spots, but some places you can walk right to, like I said, and you can sling trees for anchors. And then some of the more popular climbs do have bolts as well. So you can get away with, having less equipment. So these are shorter pieces of webbing. So you don't need this huge, long piece of static rope to build anchors. Slinging trees and things, for some of the climbs you can get away with shorter webbing and a couple carabiners. So it is a nice spot. Not that I would ever say, minimize gear to be safer, but it's a nice place to go to get to on a lot of climbs, throughout the day. So it's just a great spot. A fun fact for McConnell's Mill, we're trying to add just something different. Slippery Rock Creek goes right through McConnell's Mill State Park, and there is a 2-mile run that's class 4, and then seasonally, so now when snow's melting and things, class 5 whitewater. So if you search for McConnell's Mill State Park and you haven't been there, you need to search for Rim Road climbing area, or as Zach said, go on Mountainproject. You'll get a lot of good information there. But you'll also hear a lot of people do whitewater there. There's a nice 2-mile run that you can go multiple times in a day, and it's a short vehicle shuttle. So not rock climbing, whitewater paddling, but super cool. So here's a picture from a couple years ago. And a lot of times now when I go climbing, I just climb. I don't take pictures anymore. So here's a picture climbing. This is top rope, so this is like the beginner area. It's kind of like a big open bowl. But you park on top, set anchors there, drop your ropes down. You can rappel if you want, or walk down around. That's normally what I do. And then it's just a great spot. Lots of options, even along one line. So rock climbing, if you've got a group of people, and some people can climb a little bit harder, you can have the same rope and have beginner route one side, maybe a little bit harder, maybe a little overhanging, a little variety that a lot of people will run into. There's also a lot of boulders around here. So the picture here on the left is a nice climb. It progresses, so it starts a little bit easier, kind of staircase-like. It's wanting to throw you off a little bit, but it's pretty good. But then it gets harder, right? So we always joke about the hardest part of the climb should never be the beginning, right? The hardest part of the climb should be like 2/3 or 3/4 of the way up. And Mcconnell's Mill has a lot of routes like that. There are routes, obviously, where the hardest move is closer to the bottom, but it's just good spots. So the other picture there, that is the Breakneck Bridge area. You might be able to see it in the very top of that picture. There is a bridge in Breakneck Bridge. It's not open to vehicular traffic anymore, but that is that's where you're climbing. You're climbing right next to a waterfall. It's very rugged, very gorgeous. Lots of people hike there, and like I said, lots of whitewater paddling as well. So really cool, local place that you can be to and get there and come back in the same day, and not be out. You still have time to do different things. So. Very similar to McConnell's Mills would be Whipp's Ledges. So Whipp's Ledges is the only spot that we're going to talk about climbing in Cleveland Metro Parks. Everywhere else, all the other places that we've talked about in the presentation is not managed by Cleveland Metro Parks. Cleveland Metro Parks, as you're probably familiar, county-wide park district. So some of those other places we mentioned are managed by different places. McConnell's Mills is a state park in Pennsylvania. Mad River Gorge is Springfield Parks and Trails. So, it's different. It's managed. The New River Gorge we'll talk about. It's a national park now, right? So there's just different land managers and owners of these different places. But Whipp's Ledges is in Hinckley. It's in Hinckley's reservation. It is managed by us, Cleveland Metro Parks. Good places to park is Top of Ledges picnic area because it's not reservable. There is a lower parking lot, but that shelter at the lower parking lot is reservable. So oftentimes you'll find that parking lot is full. So Top of Ledges, we recommend people to go. That's off Bellis Road, just east of State Road, south of Route 303. So we're kind of, south of Cleveland quite a good bit. But again, the hikes to get there are really quick. I know lots of people were out climbing yesterday and today. With the threat of rain, people were there early. But I was out there yesterday. Lots of people climbing, and again, you don't have to hike very far to get there, which is nice. So different types of climbing there, I would say primarily bouldering and top roping. Put a question mark on that traditional climbing because there's not a ton of traditional climbing at Whips. Again, it's not a spot you would go to do that activity, but there are a few routes that you can trad climb or set up a top rope and then haul another rope. If you're just practicing with your equipment, you could trad climb as you are actually still on top rope, so that's nice. Gear at Whipp's Ledges does require a little bit more equipment. So we recommend for Whipp's Ledges, and we'll show some pictures here in a minute, but a longer static. So this is like a 10, 11 millimeter static rope. So I want to know if anybody knows why this rope is called a static rope. So you got the chat feature there. I know we don't have a ton of people watching tonight, but we do record these and we make these available on YouTube afterwards as well. So if anyone is paying attention and chatting, why is this called a static rope? So we'll continue here. But static rope's recommended. This is a good way to tie off to a tree and then kind of rappel out using assisted blocking belay device like a gree or something like that. And then this way, some of the routes at Whipp's Ledges have bolts. So you can rappel to those anchors, clip those anchors, or use your static line as a safety tether, clip your bolts, and then kind of go back off. Or there's a lot of routes, way more routes, hundreds of routes that don't have bolts. You would use your static rope to set up your anchor. So do we have any responses to why this is called static or questions?
Yeah, it seems like Alex says because it does not move, that's why they call it static rope.
Yeah, so I can move it, but yeah, so static rope on paper doesn't really stretch. In reality, it does. It stretches a couple percent, oftentimes less than 3 to 5% static rope. So if I have 10 feet out and this rope stretches 2%, it's only going to stretch 2 feet, right? or I'm sorry, that'd be 10%, less than that. I should have used 100 feet. Simple math. Where a climbing rope is dynamic rope. So it's not quite like a bungee cord, but it does take some of that absorption from your body when you fall and that sort of thing. So the rope does stretch, where a static rope does not. So when we're building anchors, and this is not an anchor building class, this is just an overview of different places climbing, but you want to build anchors with static material that doesn't stretch, and you want to climb on dynamic rope that does stretch. So just some simple things there. So that's good. Other equipment, you could have quick draws for routes that do have a couple bolts up top for anchors. But if not, you can just use a sling and some carabiners. Always need 4 carabiners to set up a top rope, in my opinion, especially if you're using bolts. But again, still minimal gear, in my opinion, but it can be an investment if we're telling people, you know, you need to go buy 30 to 50 feet of static rope to safely set up some of the climbs. You know, that can be a significant expense to people, but once you have it, you know, you're not having to pay to climb in most places. So there are exceptions, but most places you don't have to pay to climb anywhere. So just a fun fact, at Whip Sledges, you may have seen them out there, but there are some fire departments, different areas all group up at Whips and do some rescues for rock climbing to practice, you know, for rescues at Whips if ever needed, or just like edge and bridge kind of high angle rescue stuff. You know, there's lots of environments that they get into that aren't rock climbing, but they need to use rope technical rescue stuff, so that's what they do. It's a good place to practice. So this picture here shows this is the main area. So on Mountainproject, this is the main wall. You'll see a picture in a little bit, more of a diagram. It's the kiosk, but we'll talk about this for just a second. So this is the main area. So you come from the parking lot, you go down, this is the steps, and then a lot of the climbs here on the left. So you can see they're not super tall. A lot of them, you know, 30, 40. There might be a couple 50-foot climbs in this area, but in general, they're shorter climbs. But that's good, right? It's a great place. It's our local crag that people talk about. A lot of people use it as training ground to go out to bigger places, to have, you know, the adventures that people love and that sort of thing. Or, you know, you're taking beginners out, or it's just a good place that, you know, some people only ever want a top rope, and this is a great place to do that. And so we do classes out there. We do programs and different things. Here's a picture. It's actually from a couple years ago, but this is the bottom of the keyhole climb, and you know, you can see we do good classes out there with significant amount of people, sometimes teaching people how to climb, teaching people how to boulder and how to spot correctly, and like I've mentioned a couple times, we do offer anchor building classes, and we even have some coming up, so I'll mention those in a little bit. But so here's a overview picture. So this is kind of the kiosk picture that's at the kiosk, and the blue is the Buckeye Trail coming through. That's helpful because it's blazed blue on the map and on trees. But you can see the Topple Ledges picnic area is there. That's a good place to park. And then you can hike down the blue Buckeye Trail, which gets pretty muddy because the big field there drains that way. But if you follow that orange trail down, and then you can see on the key there and the legend that all the climbs and the stone stairs and everything that's there. So the main area is where the most of the climbs are, but there are other areas that people aren't on. Like I said, I climbed yesterday on a route that I've never seen anybody on, and it was super fun. So I didn't get to the top early in the spring, didn't climb a lot over the winter, but lots of good places to climb there. You don't just have to be in that main wall. So this is more graphic, just that is on the kiosk. I'll step off here just so you can see it a little bit better. But there are good routes there, right? Like I said, most of the routes are 20 to 30 feet high. We have, you know, there's probably over 100 climbs. Some of those are contrived. You know, they're not great. You know, lots of adventure to be had at Whip Sledges. But some of the caution things that we mention when we're talking about climbing is with the bolts that have been installed, we ask that you use your own hardware on that equipment. So you shouldn't be threading a rope through chains or bolts up there to be, just climbing on yourself. We want you to attach your own equipment, and that's standard practice everywhere, basically. So, we just want you to preserve the gear that's been there. And then for the routes that's not bouldered routes, if it's, you're slinging trees and that sort of thing, be careful around the root systems, just so that we're not compacting the dirt around there, so that we have those trees for nature and for anchors in the future and that sort of thing. And then the last two things is, with it being sandstone, it doesn't dry super fast and it does absorb the water. So like, it rained today, I wouldn't climb tomorrow, especially because the temperature is going way down. But if it's not really windy and really warm after it rains, you're not going to be able to climb right away. So just take that into consideration. That's kind of as, I don't know if we have beginner climbers in the class or people that are more experienced, but that comes with the territory with climbing. Every discipline, every activity has its kind of negatives. Climbing on sandstone in the rain is frowned upon, right? We don't do it. We break holds. It's not good for the resource. It's not good for advocacy. It's the same reason mountain bikers don't mountain bike on trails when they're muddy, and you don't paddle because when it's super windy and that sort of thing. It's just not quite as safe and not good for the resource. So here would be your typical anchor, or one portion of your anchor when you are setting up a climb. So nice big static rope that we have here, and we go around the tree, a couple times. Something that we can make this, this anchor better is we could pad that, right? We could put like carpet squares on the back, or foam, that sort of thing, just to protect the bark of that tree. It's a pretty big tree with lots of surface area, so not doing too bad here. But this would be one anchor that is far away from the cliff, right? Some of the routes that have bolts, and these two pictures are on the kiosk at the top of ledges. There's no kiosk at the bottom picnic area. But here shows the anchors that are at whips are glue-in anchors. So if anyone has questions about anything we're saying, let us know. We can, stop presenting, jump on questions, or, we can save questions towards the end as well. But so here's two, I would say, typical setups when there are bolted anchors in place. So use your static rope to tether out to these. Some of these places you can just kind of lay down on the rock and reach, but we recommend that you're tethered in. So you have your harness on, tied off to a tree, go down towards the cliff edge. Set your anchors. If you are into sport climbing and you have done sport climbing, you can set anchors like the picture there on the left with the two quick draws and the gold and black carabiners. And if you have never been sport climbing or you don't have quick draws, just get a double runner, like a 1-inch, static webbing, and 4 carabiners, and we can, safely teach you pretty quickly how to set up a climb. So these are just two examples, right? We're not telling you have to do it this way, but we don't want you climbing on the fixed hardware that's there. So this is a good way to climb and use what's there safely. One of the other things about this is kind of far as taking down equipment. If you know how to sport climb and you've been sport climbing and that sort of thing, you can safely transition to then rappel or lower on the hardware that is in place for that last climber. But for a lot of people, it's just as quick to pull your rope down, walk back up around the cliff, and then same thing, tether in with that static line, go out to the cliff edge, reach down, grab your equipment, and then be on your way, and you're already at the top of the cliff. So just recommended things. I will plug, before we talk about Seneca Rocks here towards the end, I will plug next week we're doing a virtual rock climbing class, and it is virtual anchor building. So it's an hour long, but it's going to give good principles for anchor building. And then if you continue to check the website, and that's clevelandmetroparks.com/OR, and it's the letter O and the letter R for outdoor recreation. You'll see that we're having anchor building classes coming up. I think they're in April. So you'll see that. Lots of good stuff. We have all the equipment. We provide all that equipment. we'll be outside, so we'll do some knots, and then we teach people how to build anchors. So if it's, if you're primarily indoor climber and you want to, venture outside, enjoy nature, do the things that you love in a different environment, that's a great place to learn. And they're great classes. Like I said, we're partial because, I'm one of the 3 instructors at Cleveland Metro Parks that teaches it. Zach being one of the others, and our coworker Ashley being another instructor teaching that. But they are great programs, and that virtual one, it's just a simple way, right? You can sit at your house, you can be on your phone, you can listen. We'll have visuals like this, we'll critique climbs, we'll say, what's wrong with this anchor, right? What's wrong with these anchors? Nothing, right? They're great. What's wrong with some other stuff? So we'll talk about that when we're doing that class. So like I said, jump on the website, clevelandmetroparks.com/OR. And keep going back to that. As we add programs, you'll see more and more anchor building coming up as the weather gets warmer. So I want to jump to Seneca Rocks, and I got a cough here. The Seneca Rocks is about 4 hours away. Seneca Rocks is gorgeous. We'll make you pay attention here to the slides for a second before we jump ahead, because you'll see what Seneca Rocks looks like. But before that, so it's a little farther away. It is east of Elkins, West Virginia, and Elkins is where your cell phone is going to work, and then you go to Seneca Rocks and your cell phone stops working, right? So there's a radio dead zone in West Virginia, and Seneca Rocks is in that dead zone. So your cell phone won't work, high-powered microwaves aren't allowed, your radios won't work, all sorts of different things. So you can look on the line why that is down there, but there's lots of cool things, and cell phones are one of the things that are not down there. So Elkins is the closest big town with a hospital and food and amenities and that sort of thing. Seneca Rocks is a tiny little area. I wouldn't even call it a town. It is very wonderful. I love Seneca Rocks. It is an intersection. Seneca Rocks is there, and there's your country store and your old general store, and that's it, right? Those are also the restaurants and the gas stations and the Jarndarm, which is a climbing shop, right? Those are the main things in the town. So main type of climbing there would be traditional climbing. Seneca Rocks is a 300-foot fin that sticks up out of the top of a mountain, and it's wonderful, right? So you have 2 sides to climb and an end, basically. And it is the highest spot, I believe, in West Virginia that you can't hike to, right? So you have to be able to climb to the top. For Seneca, you would need to have experience climbing, obviously, and this is some of the equipment that you would need, right? So this is not even a complete full rack, right? But this is just a lot of the trad climbing gear that you would need for that, and a lot of carabiners and a lot of draws, lots of equipment to make climbing at Seneca work. There are some top roping and sport routes, but there aren't a lot of that there's not a lot. You can set up any route basically as a top rope, but someone has to be able to lead climb to set up a top rope, right? And then you got to be able to go back and get your gear. Not a lot of walk-offs at Seneca Rocks. You're climbing up, and because it is that tall fin, which you'll see here, I believe, in the next picture, you got to be able to. You're going to be rappelling down. So, in Seneca Rocks, it was used to train. So we can jump to the next picture here, Zach. So this is what Seneca Rocks looks like from one of the area campgrounds. So there are 2 area, right? There's the north and the south area. You can kind of see, I'll see if I can point to it, right there. That's called the gun sight, because there used to be a freestanding pillar in the center of that that fell down, I believe in the late 80s. Could be wrong there. But so there's the north face. You can actually hike to the north face and kind of scramble out on that area. But the south face, you have to be able to climb to. And then we're looking at the west face. There is an east face that's actually taller. So you see there's more exposed rock on the east side of the rock. But the approach is a little bit farther to hike to. If you have been to Seneca, you know there's something called the Stairmaster. So huge Access Fund projects, and the Access Fund being the main advocacy group for rock climbing around the country, has had tons of work days there where they're moving huge boulders to prevent erosion as you hike up to Seneca Rocks. So Seneca Rocks is that traditional rock climbing place. So you can see this is, you figured out Zach and I like to climb together, for work when we're teaching people, and then also outside of work. So this is Zach coming up, I think, or maybe me coming up on one of the routes there. And from far away, Seneca Rocks, might not look like much, but when you're there, this is looking down, and this is just one rope length. So trad climbing, if you're not familiar, is where you both start at the bottom, and then you're using equipment like this, right? So this is a fancy cam, but we squeeze here and it gets smaller. We would put it in a crack, and then as it expands, that would hold you. And then down here, you would clip a carabiner with more nylon runners, and then you clip your climbing rope through that from the ground. So if I were to have this piece of gear in the rock and only this piece of gear, and I go up 10 feet and put this gear in at 10 feet and then climb 2 feet above this, I'm going to fall 2 feet to my piece of gear and then 2 feet below my piece of gear, right? That's why you're climbing up with all of this, right? So I'm taking all of this with me, and there's different size cams you can see. There are kind of hexes, old school hexes here. That's nice. And then we have stoppers. So this is just the wedge shape that we're putting in constrictions in the rock. You can see that picture. So all sorts. Like I would say this is even just like a medium-sized cam, and then there's a smaller one. So even within each piece of equipment, there's different sizes that range, from things smaller than your pinky up to things, bigger than your forearms that we're putting in cracks and that sort of thing. So we climb up, we use a lot of this equipment, and then, we do that safely, and then the lead climber builds the anchor, which you'll see here in a minute, an anchor in the next picture, I believe. And that anchor then is built by the lead climber, and then they belay up the other climber, right? The person that's following. So here I am, I guess, on one of these climbs. I build an anchor, and I belay up the second, right? So Zach's coming up following me, and he is taking all of this equipment out of the cracks as we come up the climb. And that way, we didn't leave anything behind. We're just climbing up, having a good time. And then when we get to the top, we rappel down, right? And oftentimes in trad climbing environments, there are bolts or rappel stations, trees that are slung with big steel carabiners that are left and that sort of thing. So Seneca Rocks is great. I'll pull up the Seneca Rocks book here. So if you remember the Mcconnell's Mill book, which I talked about, at Western Pennsylvania, had about 30 or 40 pages. This book here, and they just released a new one of these because there was a bunch of wrong pictures in this one. But it's like 215 pages, right? So a lot more climbing at Seneca, and really trad climbing, right? So I want to take just a minute. We'll probably have about 5-10 minutes towards the end to answer questions. If you have questions, you can type those questions now in the chat box, and then if we have engagement, people are talking, we'll get those questions answered. But one of the things about trad climbing, so if you've been climbing inside, there's definitely a way to learn to climb outside with building anchors safely and that sort of thing. So not only is the way to climb a little bit different, right? There's not shiny things on the walls that we know where to hold. Outside climbing is obviously a lot different. But from climbing inside to either bouldering outside or top roping outside as the next beginner-friendly things, there's the skill level that you need to have, and oftentimes that's building anchors. But then there's also the etiquette of what you do outside. So inside we like music, we use chalk, we're hanging out with buddies, hanging out on the couches, that sort of thing. When we transition outside, a lot of those things can go away, right? So blasting music's not the greatest etiquette. Using tons of chalk, not the greatest etiquette. Hanging out with buddies being super loud, not the greatest etiquette. So we kind of have that gap when we're going even just from outside to, going from inside to outside. And then in sport climbing or lead climbing, sport climbing, and then lead climbing, trad climbing, I would say there's another gap of learning, right? So just having the skills or the ability is one thing, but then being able to do it safely in an outdoor environment is different. So hopefully that makes sense. Sport climbing inside is similar to sport climbing outside, but there are other variables outside that aren't quite as in control as when you're inside. So there's that kind of learning difference there. And I would say etiquette, a little bit etiquette too. When you're outside, it's a little bit different. And then jumping up into trad climbing is vastly different, I would say. Mostly because trad climbing too, just by nature, is going to be in more remote environments. So you're dealing with other kind of backcountry issues like water and restrooms and that sort of thing, and the weather, right? If it rains and I'm at Mad River Gorge, or I'm at Log Town, or I'm at, other places we mentioned, I'm at McConnell's Mill. If it starts raining, I can just go get in my car in a minute. Or if I'm up a pitch or two at Seneca, you're not just going to be in your car in 20 minutes, right? You're still going to be getting down probably in 20 minutes. So it adds learning about weather and route finding and all of these things. Just because in the book, and there's a nice little picture, if you could only climb 5'8", and you happen to wander onto a 5'10", you can find yourself in a little bit more trouble. So it's not just the skill level that's required to do these different things. There are other things to consider. I joked at the beginning that I don't want to be a good climber. I just want to be an old climber. I can't climb 5'11" anymore, but I can still get out there and have a great time doing other things and teaching other people and climbing with younger people. So just some good stuff. So if we have questions, this is just the last picture. And then we'll answer questions if there are any. This is going back towards Sandstone, but this is New River Gorge. So south of Seneca Rocks, about an hour, is the New River Gorge. Mostly sport routes. There are a few trad routes there, but there are hundreds of routes. New River Gorge is great if you can climb over 5'8", and 5'9", 5'10". There's not a lot of super easy things. It's mostly, moderates and things that I would say are harder for a lot of beginners. So, but it is really cool. New River Gorge is now a national park. So we'll see if that changes, for climbing regulations or anything. But climbing was kind of born in Yosemite, in California, and in the national parks. So obviously people were climbing before, but climbing for recreation's sake is a very United States thing. Trad climbing was born in Yosemite, basically. So lots of cool videos about that. So Zach, we have any questions?
Yeah, so people want to know, is Whips pretty busy in the spring, summer? When is the best time to go? Is it after work or during the weekend?
Yeah, I would say climbing in general, obviously the weekends are going to be more busy, right? That's going to be true for anywhere. And that's going to be true for any activity. If you get up earlier or go late afternoon, you're not going to run into as many people. But if you go to, we'll use Whip Sledges as an example. If you go to Whip Sledges on Saturday or Sunday last summer, there were days where I counted 13, 14 ropes hanging. So to give you an example, there are 12 routes that have anchors on top with bolts, and probably on Mountainproject, there's over 100 routes. I would say there's probably 60 or 70 worth getting on, and it can be busy. So climbing midweek is great. Climbing after work, showing up at 3:30 when other people are probably done climbing, that's a good spot to go. There are secluded places you can get to, anywhere. Seneca Rocks is the same way. Seneca Rocks, there's the campground. One of the campgrounds is right across the parking lot to get to, so a lot of people walk from the campground. And when I grew up trad climbing there, your goal is to be as quiet as possible when you woke up and have your gear already in your bag, because if you go to pick up your rack like this and make that noise, you're going to wake people up, and now you're all walking to the cliff together. So if you are not climbing by 7 a.m. at Seneca Rocks on a weekend, you're going to be waiting on a route for people. So climbing is popular, but some people don't like getting up early or different things. So you're gonna just there's other stuff to get on. Just because there's a ton of people out there doesn't mean it's actually that busy. So we teach other things in outdoor recreation, like other things like backpacking and that sort of thing. Oftentimes when we hear about places being really busy or packed, like the national parks are really busy, sometimes that just means the parking lot's really busy. Or the really famous trail that made it in the National Geographic is really busy. Or the famous route that's on the cover of, the New River Gorge guidebook is really popular and really busy, right? But there's plenty of other climbs worth getting onto and having a good time out there. So, and if we don't have other questions, I want to thank you guys for coming. I know we did mention and kind of plug the anchor building class that we have coming up in the next Thursday or 2 weeks. But like I said, clevelandmetroparks.com/OR for outdoor recreation. And then as you scroll down, you'll see all the programs listed there. So if you were to do it right now, you would see like a try cross-country skiing scheduled for Saturday and Sunday, which we obviously won't be skiing. But there's other programs there. We have a land navigation class coming up. We do some pie iron cooking classes and just lots of different things. And then we've been doing lots of hikes on Tuesdays during the day, if you're available during the day. So if you have questions, we'll stick around for a little bit with the chat feature. I'm going to jump off as Zach kind of jumps to the last slide there that does have the website on it. But if you have questions, feel free to let us know in the chat feature and we'll stick around. Thanks, guys.